From the CISO series, it's Cybersecurity Headlines.
CrowdStrike exec apologizes in Congress for global IT outage. NIST drops password complexity, mandatory reset rules, and airline executives' lawsuit exposes hack for hire practice. These are some of the stories that my colleagues and I have selected from this past week's cybersecurity headlines. And now we're ready for some insight, opinion, and expertise from our returning guest, Jason Elrod, the CISO over at Multicare Health Systems. It's been about 2 years since we've had you on, Jason.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start out. Thank you so much for being here today. How was your week in cybersecurity?
Um, what do we say here? Dynamic and no comment.
That sounds like a very compliant answer, and we appreciate you making the time. I know it's always a busy time for our CISO guests. Thanks also to our sponsor for today, Vanta, compliance that doesn't suck too much. Remember to join us on YouTube Live. Do so. Go to CISOseries.com, hit the events drop down, and look for the cybersecurity headlines week in review image and click on it to join us. You can join CCL and some of our other regulars in our chat, having some fun there, giving us their thoughts, their comments, some of their expertise, even on some of these stories. So if you want to get involved with that, have some of the fun, make sure you are joining us live. We're going to be jumping into the news here, but just a quick reminder that these are all Jason's opinions. These are his personal opinions, not necessarily those of his employer, affiliates, sure, why not, staff, what other addendums you want to add to that. So, Jason, I want to first get your first thoughts. Here's our first story here. CrowdStrike exec apologizes in Congress for global IT outage. In testimony before the House Subcommittee on Cybersecurity, top 3 subcommittee for me, CrowdStrike Vice President Adam Myers issued an apology for the faulty sensor update that caused a widespread Windows meltdown back in July. You may remember it. In addition to the standard statements of sorrow and contrition that are mandatory for these types of things, Myers outlined measures the company is taking to avoid a repeat incident, including carefully controlled rollouts of software updates, improved code input validation, and testing procedures that cover a broad array of problematic scenarios. CrowdStrike has also provided customers more control over the deployment of system configuration updates. And kind of coming from the other side of this, Microsoft plans to help by providing new platform capabilities in Windows 11 to allow security vendors to operate outside of kernel mode, which was kind of the source of all of this. So, Jason, CrowdStrike, who, by the way, just kudos, was named this week a leader in the 2024 Gartner Magic Quadrant for Endpoint Protection Platforms, 5th consecutive time. They seem very sorry for what has happened. And I'm curious, when you see these types of public announcements, given how they have responded to this incident, are you willing to believe them? And can you provide some, I guess, context for, giant outage, taking a lot of steps that seem to be going in the right direction? How should we take this?
God, it's a fantastic question. When it comes to public apologies from major players like CrowdStrike, I approach it with the trust but verify mindset. I mean, seriously, it's in CrowdStrike's best interest to ensure that they make all these necessary changes.
Mm-hmm.
They have to. There's too much at stake too, especially as a leader, like you mentioned, in the quadrant here. But
Got to keep Gartner happy, yeah.
Got to keep Gartner happy there, I didn't mention Gartner. That said, in incidents like this, they highlight the essential lesson for all organizations. No matter how solid your security posture seems, you need to have contingency plans for when things go wrong. Because the reality is, cybersecurity plans, even the best laid ones, can and will fail at times. This makes it critical to pressure test every control in your environment and all the systems running. CrowdStrike's measures, like controlled software rollouts and improved testings, those are steps in the right direction, 100%. However, organizationally, we have a responsibility too. So we need to be investing in business continuity and depth strategies, ensuring that even when an essential tool like endpoint protection fails, the broader systems can still function. I know Microsoft is changing some of how that looks inside of their stack to help enable that. But really, having multiple layers of fallback protection and testing those vigorously, I'm going to say, as vigorously as your primary defense is going to be the true key to resilience here.
Yeah, and one of the conversations I find most fascinating, kind of coming out all of this, is it really, the outage really shined a light on one of the core assumptions, I guess, almost every organization that was making on that, like that could not be a point of failure to the degree that it was. And the fact that we can now know that that is an assumption and like account for that, I think overall, even though I my deepest sympathies to everyone that was, had a horrible July because of that outage. Like if we can get to a better place because of that, like that's a net positive.
It is a net positive. It does highlight something else though. When we have vendor concentration, solution concentration, or even protection concentration in our environments. So if it's consolidated all to one product, now, I mean, this is the first time in 13 years, I think. That's how long CrowdStrike's been around, right? That something like this has happened for them, this measure. But when we start focusing a lot of our capabilities and functions into a single vendor, a single platform, a single provider, what we are doing is we're providing an out. Hey, it's efficient and it's effective and it's all those kind of things. But it also provides a highly force multiplied target for the bad guys. So and this is an example. They're like, oh wait, if they weren't thinking about it before, now they are. I mean, I'm not going to bring up the Change Healthcare thing.
We don't want too anxiety inducing.
I don't want too much anxiety today, but I'm with healthcare. But that's an example of vendor concentration, right? So especially when you're talking about critical infrastructure, they don't have to hit everything. They just have to hit the one thing that everything uses. And this is an example of that. So I think it's a silver lining because it brings that up. And also it's kind of that early warning that, hey, where else can you look inside of your infrastructure where you might have a single point of failure like that, or a single point of impact amplification?
And CCL in our chat kind of echoing that, saying exactly, diversify IT infrastructure. Definitely think good stuff there. Next up here, NIST drops password complexity and mandatory reset rules. In the second public draft version of its password guidelines, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, we know it as good old NIST, is making two changes. The first is that credential service providers stop requiring users to set passwords that use specific types of characters. And the second is to stop mandating periodic password changes, 60, 90 days. We all know the drill. The first suggestion paves the way for longer passwords of between 15 and 64 characters, and that they include ASCII and Unicode characters. The second supports the idea that password resets should only occur in the case of a credential breach, or at least make them not add one to them every 2 months, making people change passwords, frequently, resulting in just weaker passwords overall. So Jason, the focus of the first, make passwords longer, which makes them harder to crack. The second idea seeks to reduce non-participation or token participation, maybe, or people just get tired of having to change their passwords for seemingly no reason. Do you think people are willing to accept these new rules, and do these put us in a better position going forward?
I think there's two sides to this coin. So one, I think overall people will welcome the changes. Like you mentioned, the idea of longer passwords is inherently more secure. Go ahead and do the math. You're trying to crack a 15 to 64 character password. Good luck in this current technology environment. But what makes this change really interesting is the second part, getting rid of those annoying 30, 60, 90-day password resets. From an employee satisfaction perspective, it's a big win. People get frustrated with having to change passwords frequently for no apparent reason. No, there have been reasons in the past, but I kind of agree with this. Don't change it unless you need to. Make it of sufficient length that it's hard or near impossible to crack. But just because we do that, we end up with another problem. So why do I have to type in CISO series headline JSON was so great? I love that conversation. # asterisk dash every single time I log in. So we end up having this really long, complex password. So we're trading one reset kind of issue with how can I make that super simple? What is the simplest I can make that long password? So along with this, we need some things that can mitigate that, like help with password managers and automated MFA activities, and honestly, move towards a passwordless solution. I mean, we have to start focusing on that. How can we move beyond having to do that even? So I think that would be the next step, something like biometric authentications or FIDO2, things of that nature. So It's directionally, I think it's right. We're trading a little bit of one problem for another here, and I think, but overall, I think it's net positive. I really support it.
And CCL in our chat has the question: this NIST recommendation is applicable after enabling 2FA, specifically the rotation part. I would imagine NIST ain't telling you not to do MFA or 2FA.
Do MFA.
Yeah,
you're not doing it. Do it now.
Do all the factors. All the factors. We need all the factors. Next up here, airline executives lawsuit exposes hack for hire practice. According to The Record, an aviation executive, Farhad Azima, settled litigation this week against the law firm Deschert and two of its former attorneys who he alleged were involved in the hacking of his personal accounts in order to smear his reputation. This case is drawing attention to a practice conducted by some law firms, private investigators, or just mercenary companies to steal information through cyber attacks. On behalf of their United Arab Emirates-based client, the firm allegedly hired a private investigator in North Carolina, who then hired India-based hacking firms to dig up dirt on Azima. So just it's a global effort here, I guess, on behalf of this guy. So Jason, yeah, you got the map to help us.
The map back here. I'm trying to keep track of this one.
Some pins and some yarn. We'll be all set up. So Jason, here we have a hacking company, other companies looking, or I'm sorry, we have a company hacking another company looking for evidence rather than just looking to steal stuff. I guess that's just as bad, right? It's not any better, right?
It's not any better.
Yeah.
Okay. This is just the latest iteration of corporate espionage. A version of it, I think. It's been around for ages, but we now have cyber capabilities that make it even more dangerous, and those layers of obfuscation, like we're playing the Where Waldo of hacker back here, or as you described, it sounded like maybe the Rube Goldberg machine.
Yeah.
Get the data out of it. We're hitting a ping pong ball and bang, lawsuit.
I just think of all the subcontracting that was involved in this scheme here.
But the idea of companies hiring hackers, hiring that external third party to gather information for leverage, it's not only unethical, but it's also illegal, in my opinion. Not a lawyer, but it seems unlikely that any evidence obtained through an illegal hacking won't stand up in court. Matter of fact, I think introducing that kind of evidence could backfire and lead to charges against the party bringing it forward.
Yeah, so, I don't know what unless it's just a straight up blackmail, kind of situation. But even then, that to me, I don't know why you're getting a law firm involved in that. Again, not a lawyer, so I a little bit out in front of my skis on this.
They're super clear with the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. There we go.
Yeah,
so that's right. That's why you get the lawyers involved. But honestly, this hacker for hire, it's no different than threat actors involved in ransomware as a service operations. It's just, different words. Whether you're hacking to steal data or to obtain leverage, the underlying motive is still criminal. And there's a profit motive behind both.
Well, and so I guess then it because it's essentially the same motivation and mechanism, the same security controls that we have in place, hopefully, whether they're applying to an executive or to your infrastructure or something like that, that's all. It's all kind of a catch-all for all, right? If we're improving our resilience for our organization, we also are improving our resilience for our executives, right?
Well, and it's interesting you brought that up because people are going to be going after individuals who may or may not be protected in the same manner that the organizational assets are. Mm-hmm. And so this action of soft power, soft influence, versus hard, like I'm attacking the system and breaking in this way, being able to compromise an executive, somebody with influence. Back to that amplification comment I made. So who in an organization has the most amplification of impact? What is your single point of concentration? Great to start with the CEO, because everybody starts there and goes down. So if you're looking to actually impact something, go there. And our executives and as individuals now, we're targets. Honestly, and the more public you are in the company, the more public it is known about your impact ability within an organization, the more protection you need. So I think we need to start exploring how are we protecting our executive teams? How are we protecting those high target value assets that an organization has outside, whether they're on premise or off premise in their personal lives? Because I think the front line there's blurred.
Yeah. Well, and we have, there's protection like from litigation. There's a lot of times physical
Mhm.
security considerations, especially when you're dealing with, Fortune 100 or something like that. But yeah, from the cyber perspective, especially since everyone has just an expanding footprint, yeah, definitely a conversation I think we're going to be hearing more of as time goes on. I don't think this is going to be certainly not a one-off in any sense.
Mm.
All right, before we move on to our next story, I have to spend a few moments with our sponsor for today, Vanta. As third-party breaches continue to rise, companies are increasingly vigilant, which means more time spent on manual security reviews. With Vanta questionnaire automation, security and compliance teams can complete security reviews up to 5 times faster, giving you time back to focus on running your security and compliance programs. Over 8,000 global companies like ZoomInfo, SmartRecruiters, and Noibu use Vanta to save time on security reviews. Visit Vanta.com to learn more about questionnaire automation. That's VANTA.com. All right, our next story here. Dismissed German cyber chief falsely accused of associating with Russian spies. Arne Schonbaum was the head of Germany's Federal Cybersecurity Office until he was dismissed 2 years ago following a scandal that suggested he had connections to Russian spies. We definitely covered that on cybersecurity headlines when that news broke. The allegations were made on a late-night satirical program, ZDF Magazine Royale. The Munich Regional Court has now made a preliminary assessment against the program. Schonbaum is suing ZDF as well as pursuing separate cases against his former employer, the Federal Office for Information Security, for unfair dismissal. So, Jason, we've seen stories similar to this one over the years. A company or organization so afraid of the whiff of scandal that they fire someone immediately on the faintest of evidence. And in some ways, kind of reminds me of the conversation we were just having about, kind of protecting executives. This obviously a little bit of a different situation, but still very much the case here. In this case, we're dealing with a highly placed cybersecurity official, which helps to remind all CISOs that they may be one mistake away from the same fate. I'm curious, Jason, how does this make you feel, given that this is an industry already suffering from stress, burnout, and people wondering, do they even want these jobs?
Oh, man, there's so much to unpack here.
I give you the easy ones. I give you all the easy ones.
Yeah, you throw me the softballs on it. So before I kind of roll into my troubling trends about this, if you think about it, CISOs in organizations, and especially if they're effective, I have no idea if this German CISO was effective or not, but the effective or not become targets, because if you're a threat actor and you're looking for a target and you go, wow, that CISO is really good. They got a strong program. They have a lot of, you know what we need to do? We need to get that joker out of the way. How can we do that? And that kind of leads to this point here, this situation, which is really an extremely troubling trend, where individuals or organizations are quick to act on accusations without sufficient evidence. Okay. Now, I know nothing really about the underlying details of going on here, but since it seems like the court is ruling in favor of the CISO, it probably said not sufficient evidence to this. So unfortunately, in today's, I would call it the clickbait-driven media landscape, we're seeing more cases where we jump from presuming innocence to presuming maliciousness based on very little proof. A single viral post or comment can ruin someone's reputation overnight. And even if you're eventually cleared, and like in this case, it sounds like, the stain on your reputation can last for years. We're talking about like the burnout and the stress that goes on it. For CISOs and cybersecurity leaders, this is a reminder of how precarious the role can be. Given the high stakes, this is both an individual stakes and your career stakes, it's crucial, and these are my tips, it's crucial for CISOs to negotiate their exit strategy on the day they're hired. Know what that's going to look like on the other side there as you're going into it. I think the way things are going, you need to consider having personal legal representation on retainer, especially for things like reputational harm or wrongful dismissal, because that can't have been cheap for this individual to defend. And sadly, being proven innocent often doesn't make the headlines. People forget that part. So while you may be financially compensated or made whole down the road, the reputational damage can linger long after the dust is settled. I mean, there's no headlines for innocence.
Yeah, it's a much less sexy headline for that kind of stuff, which is why I was glad to revisit this story. And I know it was a point of emphasis for Steve Prentice, our producer that helps put together the rundowns here, is to kind of shine a light on this, saying like, we know this made headlines 2 years ago. let's revisit it and show that this is a much thornier issue, even than potential supposed
Right.
espionage charges and that kind of
Yeah, it's
stuff.
like this huge headline news on the front of the newspaper, and then like 2 months later,
Yeah,
that was
the
complete lie.
correction
I
on
made that stuff
page
up. It's on the
16.
back page, a
Yeah.
little like note back there. Damage is done. Damage is done.
Yeah, definitely some good recommendations, and definitely some conversations we've had on Defense in Depth on the CISO series as well. So some good points for sure. Next up here, public Wi-Fi hacked at some of the UK's busiest train stations. Train passengers connecting to free Wi-Fi at any major rail stations in England were greeted with an Islamophobic message on their devices when logging on and connecting to the Wi-Fi's network landing page. The incident is now being investigated, of course, but Mohammed Patel, lead security engineer at Checkpoint Software, pointed out how public Wi-Fi is often unencrypted and easily accessible and provides an ideal entry point for attackers. He further pointed out how outdated hardware and software creates exploitable vulnerabilities, which is a growing concern for systems as vital as public transport. On the other side of this, Graham Cluley dismissed the story as presented in the London media as not being a major terror risk, comparing it to scrawling graffiti on a station wall. Granted, the perpetrators didn't set up something like a bogus page to steal money or I guess cause a public panic or something like that, but they did penetrate the Wi-Fi system of a third-party vendor to the British rail system. Surely there's something to be concerned about, given how many times we're talking about third-party vendors being blamed for data breaches and ransomware. That's the theme of the last year and a half, it seems like, is a third-party risk. Jason, I'm curious your thoughts.
It's absolutely a risk. Downplaying its importance feels almost like gaslighting the public here about the potential dangers. Because even though this particular incident didn't result in stolen money or a major data breach this time, it's a significant warning sign. Hackers penetrated the Wi-Fi system of a third-party vendor. It's a common vulnerability path, and we see it time and time again before it jumps in to the data breach or the ransomware attack or some other vector that an organization may or may not have known was a threat vector that was so exploitable. In my experience, threat actors fall into one of three broad categories, and I know tons of people complain about this or challenge me on it, but I almost feel like they're motivated by one of three C's: cache, cause, or chaos. Cache, cause, or chaos. And this instance, well, it seems to be a little bit more about cause. They're going to post some things up there. That's the graffiti version of it. I'm going to deface something or get my ideological message out. But the exposure of the system could easily leave it open for attackers motivated by cache, stealing data, and using that for identity theft or getting you just straight up give you financial information, or chaos. And that's kind of where that nation state actor that comes in. How can I cause chaos amongst the population? How can I cause huge reputational harm? How can I insert that into there? So the reputational risk here is, I guess, is similar to the German CISO we discussed, because there wasn't a major terrorist risk. Just because it's not there from a kinetic standpoint doesn't mean there's not a potential for serious reputational harm or operational damage if these systems remain vulnerable. So
yeah, I mean, the idea of a system that millions of people are going to be connecting to, presumably, that they're so used to clicking through, I'm sure, every single day or not even considering it, and being able to load any kind of media or something like that is even if it's not, hey, click through to this phishing page or whatever it might be, the reach that you have on there, the ability to load content basically onto another person's device, to me, that's kind of a big deal when you can do that. And CCL is noting cache, cause, and chaos. That'll be a forthcoming book, I think, from you, right, Jason?
It's the name of my ska band.
Oh, okay. that's a Second Wave, right? You do all English beat covers, right? Okay.
All the English beat covers.
Yeah. All right. And our final story of the day, we're going to be picking it up. Critical ATG bugs threaten critical infrastructure. Yeah. So automatic tank gauge or ATG systems are commonly found in gas stations and airports, but also at other critical facilities. Think of things like hospitals, military installations. You get the idea. And they require large backup generators. Researchers have discovered 11 new vulnerabilities across 6 ATG systems from 5 different vendors, so they're spreading the vulnerability love around. The vulnerabilities could allow an attacker to gain full control of an ATG to make fuel unavailable or wreak environmental havoc. Bugs were discovered 6 months ago, and BitSight and CISA are working with some of the impacted vendors to mitigate the problems. However, two vendors, Proteus and Alisonic, have yet to engage with CISA in remediation efforts. Experts recommend disconnecting ATGs from the public internet, even if they've been patched. So, Jason, there's almost a point in every show where I have to look over my metaphorical glasses in a school-marmy fashion. I have the Aquiline profile for it. This is one of them. Infrastructure threats, non-cooperative vendors. Is there any way we can read that as not head-scratching?
Oh, no, it seems completely reasonable.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Next question.
Well, that's just about it for the show today.
No. I mean, for gosh sakes, right? When it comes to infrastructure threats like this, it's completely irresponsible for vendors to avoid engaging with remediation efforts. That kind of non-cooperation usually comes from a place of, hey, I'm trying to preserve profit rather than doing the right thing, securing their systems. We're talking about cyber physical systems here. And while they're crucial, they're often overlooked, though. And so we're seeing, I'm glad this has come up as a news article. This critical infrastructure, healthcare, manufacturing, relies heavily on IoT, OT, and ICS systems. Especially, we'll talk about healthcare, where biomed modalities directly impact patient care. It could be a device, a medical IoT, connected to a person. That's not secure. You could have a kinetic impact immediately, a one to done. But the big issue here is that many of these systems were never designed with security in mind. Fixing the vulnerabilities in complex environments is tough, and I get it. But ignoring them only leaves the door open to serious consequences. Take something as simple as a hospital backup generator, specific to this ATG, right? Mm-hmm. Imagine it being taken offline during a winter storm, causing a power outage that could lead to, I don't know, mass casualties. That's exactly the kind of scenario that makes these vulnerabilities prime targets for terrorists or malicious actors. At the end of the day, you either do the hard work to secure these systems now, or you deal with the hard consequences later. So I might feel a little bit strongly on this one.
No, and ordinarily for stuff like this, I naming names, not necessarily like I want to have these conversations, but it's very notable that not just one, like two vendors just kind of not playing ball, to me is head scratching. Also, not designed with security in mind, OT and internet facing are three very, like, it's amazing how often that trifecta seems to come together, right?
Yeah. And I think that's changing now.
Yes.
A lot of these systems have been in there 10, 20 years with a 30, 40-year life.
Well, yeah, they're budgeted to not be up. Yeah. And would never spec for this. Yeah, that's the challenge for sure.
We've got that turbo lag in between there and now. So.
All right. Well, we are just about out of time for this show, but I want to give just a shout out to all of our commenters that we had going on. We had Max Tronic, we had David Cross. They're booking separate discussions that are going to be happening. They're pitching segments. I love it. I love to see it. CCL's taking down notes. David Spark is organizing everything over there in our chat. The big boss man himself showing up. Always appreciated. You need to join us in our chat. Remember, we are live every single Friday at 3:30 Eastern. You can convert that to your time zone of choice. No worries. Before we get out of here, Jason, is there any story that was a thumbs up or an eye roller for you in this week's news?
Gosh, I had two. I know you're like, make a choice. Okay, my choice is two. So the one about the reputational harm and then the German CISO, it hits home. We're all one viral TikTok away from being in that position. And I think whatever we can do to adjust or change that is extremely important, because we need folks to be able to take the roles that have a lot of responsibility, a lot of accountability, and a lot of risk. And if we make it so risky that an individual can't take it from a personal standpoint, who's going to do it? How are we going to get there? It's going to be, we're to blame. And I think we need to have some protections in place there somewhere. So that one hit me. And then of course the IoT, ICS one we just covered right there. It's that one's near and dear to my heart, and something that we pay attention to organizationally to get that, that secure dome over the top of it, to protect as much as we can.
Well, and I appreciate, having that expertise and kind of, making the like what the implications of that very directly, very real, and something that's obviously on your mind a lot of the time. So I truly appreciate that. Jason Elrod, the CISO over at MultiCare Health System, thank you so much for bringing all that. It's phenomenal. Absolutely love it. Where can people find you online if they want to check out what you're up to?
Well, thank you for having me here. It's been great. I enjoy it all the time. You guys are fantastic. If people want to follow me, LinkedIn, go ahead and jump on LinkedIn and follow me there. That would be fantastic. I did have a quick shout out. I talked
Please.
With a few other fantastic authors. We have a book coming out, Cyber CISO Marksmanship. Yours truly, and so a few additional excellent authors. That'll be coming out here in, we're hoping December timeframe. So look for that, Cyber CISO Marksmanship. And if you want to follow me personally, outside of that, I am starting up a newsletter. You can go to limitlesscyber.com, limitlesscyber.com. It's very basic. You're going to land there and you're going to give me your email address. And when
it sounds like a good exchange.
You're going to get it. There you go. So,
and I'm just saying, just in time for the stocking stuffer for the CISO in your life.
You got it.
That sounds like a perfect plan.
CISO.
Thanks also to our sponsor for today, Vanta, compliance that doesn't suck too much. And thanks again to all of our audience today. Really appreciate everybody writing in. Sorry we couldn't get every comment up, but I was enjoying seeing it rolling by and help make our discussion better. And that is one of my favorite parts of the show each and every week. Make sure you join us next Friday for our 2 live stream events. First up, we have Super Cyber Friday, where we'll be discussing hacking job stagnation, an hour of critical thinking about what to do when you're stuck in a rut. That happens at 1 p.m. Eastern. And then you can join us for the Week in Review at 3:30. Like I said, 3:30 Eastern, 12:30 Pacific. Sure, those are how time zones work. In the meantime, you can still get your daily news fix through cybersecurity headlines every single day. Give us about 6 minutes. We'll get you all caught up. Until the next time we meet, I'm Rich Stroffolino, reminding you to have a super sparkly day.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOseries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.